We have seen significant increases in our call volume, in the ways in which we have to respond to weather-related emergencies, even over the last 5 years. But if I start to look back 10 or 15, you can see that the response has really changed. When I first started in this, sure, we'd get summer storms and maybe a few power lines would come down. Okay, we can manage that. And in our last storm that we had, which was a simple summer storm on July 1st, we had 75% of our roads disappear. It generated 99 individual emergency calls in a 24-hour period. Flooding is a huge issue. We had power lines down. We lost phone lines for over a week. The year before, we had a similar storm where we didn't lose as many roads, but we lost power lines and phones were down for 2 weeks in that case.
In the Northeast, extreme rainfall is sort of the key story. One of the most consistent results that we see in climate models looking to the future is that it's just going to keep getting wetter and wetter here, and that rainfall is going to come in more intense storms. And when we look in the past few decades, we can see that that's already happened.
So those things take their toll on resources. They take their toll on your ability to plan ahead and not just constantly react. We try and be as proactive as we can. That preparedness piece is critical, but there's only so much you can do ahead of time, especially with a volunteer agency.
In the Upper Valley, I think we are at a point where there's enough people, including policymakers, who agree that it's happening and it's a problem, that we're now having that conversation of, okay, what do we do about it? I've only lived in the Upper Valley since 2006, and which we've had Irene, we've had 3, 4, 5 of these big events that have really impacted the community. And a lot of it comes down to culverts.
Thinking about the town plan that we just worked on, thinking about some of our mitigation strategies we just did with our local emergency planning commission, one of the things we focused on was upsizing of culverts. And the reason for that is the more water they take, the more that's off your roads, the more that's not flooding out, the more that's not undermining the culvert and then destroying the road bed that you've built.
Most of the damage from a failed culvert is not the culvert, it's the associated road damage.
If they have a flood and they go replace it, don't replace it with the same size culvert. If you're going to go replace a road anyway, take the culvert size that your planning documents say it should be and then go 1 or 2 or 3 sizes bigger, because recognizing that the data that your planning documents are based on is out of date now. We have different storms today than we had 50 years ago when those tables were all produced.
Our research has shown that in most cases, if you just increase the capacity by 1 increment of a pre-manufactured culvert, you basically can handle our most extreme projections of runoff. People look at the cost and you say, well, that culvert's going to have to be replaced at some point anyway. So it's not the cost of the culvert, it's the incremental cost of enlarging the culvert.
If that was a public culvert and it washed away, FEMA would come, because that did become a federal disaster. FEMA would come and pay 75% of that. And then actually in Vermont, the state picks up half the remainder, then the town pays half the remainder.
Because we did qualify for FEMA dollars, this was a federal disaster. And so anything that is being replaced is being upsized in the hopes that this next summer storm that we're bound to get, those will be able to handle it a little bit better and reduce the amount of flooding that we see both in homes and on roads.
Most town roads are built to the so-called 25-year storm. So the storm that has a 4% chance of occurring any year. Unfortunately, those storms are now probably a lot more than a 25-year storm. The state roads are built to 50-year storms and the interstates are built to 100-year storms. All the flood work is based upon past events. So what we use to model a stream and a culvert size is based upon what the 25-year storm was, not what the 25-year storm is going to be. And if that's maybe the 100-year storm, then we should be building to that standard.
There is data showing that if you spend more money today to upsize your culverts, if you're planning to upsize that culvert anyway, or you're planning to replace that culvert anyway, if you just spend a little more money and make it bigger, you're going to save more money in the future by avoiding some flood and some damage to the infrastructure.
Most of the policy things are either in the town plan or in their local hazard mitigation plan, both of which we often write for towns. And both of them would say things like, make bigger culverts. But that just says, somebody should do something sometime, right? It doesn't move you. It does enable you to go get some money, and at least it puts it on somebody's radar. Actually getting it done is more difficult, but If you have a disaster, it's easier because you have a hole in the ground and now you have a chance to do it right.
So look at the fact that if you still have 24-inch culverts, they probably need to be replaced and they probably need to be upsized because that's not adequate anymore, not with what we currently have. And if you're looking at protecting infrastructure like schools and highways, you got to upsize.